Jesse and Patrick, an opportunity. I'm excited to get going. Our word for the day is partnership. And that's a common word. That's a word that I think is used every day in every arena of life. But I have a different appreciation for that word, and it has really grown since getting to know you guys, because I'm of the belief that the great partnerships, the great partnerships bring very, very different things to the table, almost like a puzzle piece. And when they bring it together, they form a better whole than any of the one halves. To me, that's the partnership. I tell people all the time that are looking to do a deal, and I'm thinking about bringing in a partner. And it sounds very crass when I say it, but I just go, okay, why? Tell me why. Do you need a partner? What is it that you don't have that you need? Because a great partnership is where two parts of different skill sets, different ways of going at it, different giftedness comes together to form a better whole. And that's the word for the day, because I believe that's what you guys are about. So Jesse Lee and Patrick Choi, ladies and gentlemen, who have known each other since ... Go ahead, take it over.
Oh man, I mean, we've known each other since we were kids. I think we met probably at a Taekwondo class. Jesse's a couple years older than me, so I was probably in like 5th grade or something. You were maybe in junior high at the time.
Yeah.
I think that's just where we first met, and then I think we probably started getting close middle school, junior high age. So that was probably like 13 for me, maybe 16 for you.
Maybe a little younger, because we were still in school together.
Yeah.
I was basically Patrick's first employer. At that time, I'm 14 or 15. I somehow had a credit card. I don't remember how. I don't remember why, but I had a credit card, and I bought these, the Nokia phones are really popular at the time, and this was the year all the kids got a phone, cell phone. And I bought in bulk all these faceplates and antennas and all this stuff online, which at the time you couldn't just go to a kiosk in the mall and buy this stuff. This was, the internet was a little different 20 some years ago. So I found some wholesaler. I don't remember how I found him either, but
I think it was
bought
on eBay.
Yeah, I talked directly with him. I started working directly with the guy, and I just maxed out this credit card buying all this stuff.
These phone accessories.
Yeah, accessories,
Yeah.
exactly. And I came to school, and I just was selling them at school. Like, I'd pay $3 for the faceplate and sell them for $15. And I'd give a handful to Patrick. Here, go sell these to all your friends. And
I think it was more than that.
Yeah, it was a bunch. I don't remember.
Because I remember being like 13, and I made like $2,000 because we split the profit half and half. And yeah, and I was like, wow, that was like a great year for me.
Yeah, so that's
Gross profit margin has never been better.
Yeah.
So
And I think only in a short period of time we were put out of business though.
Yeah,
Because
no,
the
it
cell
was
phone
quick.
kiosks started coming up in the malls.
Yeah,
And they were like way undercutting us.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And you can just go there and do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like shady backroom deal with us buying
And
stuff.
I remember you would like solder on LED lights onto these cell phones, and you would just completely mess them up. And you're like, sorry, this is just how they are.
Yeah,
No refunds.
right. 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid with this soldering iron changing the lights of the LEDs on the phone. So I mean, they worked, they did, but it could have been a lot better. So.
A nice way of putting it would be Jesse's always had like an entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Yeah.
And he's always been a little bit of a schemer, but I mean that in a good way. And yeah, we kind of I think we bonded like really early on.
Yeah, just rope Patrick into all these things.
Yeah.
Here, Patrick, try this out. See
Yeah.
if you get busted.
I've always kind of been the squeaky front man though.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I never really got into trouble. I didn't want to embarrass my parents like that. But
Yeah, there were definitely times where I shielded Patrick from things that were going on.
yeah. I had to save my parents the embarrassment. Yeah.
And you take me back individually further than that. What brought you to the Northwest? Tell me a little bit about your home, your mom and your dad, your earliest influences. Tell me about that.
Well, I was born in San Jose, but I don't remember ever being there because we came to Washington when I was, I think, 2 years old. I think I vaguely remember moving into a house in Stellicum, and I had to have been about 2. I just barely remember the house, and that's like one of the earliest memories I have. But I pretty much, for all intents and purposes, I'm almost born and raised here because I don't remember anything before it. But my dad came here for some job. I don't remember what the hell he did, but he did some job here for a while. But I grew up. I started in Spanaway. I do remember being in Spanaway. We moved to Fife in an apartment, then we moved to Federal Way by the time I was right before elementary school. My dad is from Vietnam and fought in the war as a teenager on our side, right? And so I didn't hear a lot. I mean, he didn't sit down and then tell me stories like directly, but throughout life you get bits and pieces of things that happen, and there's a lot of times and a lot of struggle and hardship that I hear about growing up where, he's 14, 15, shooting Viet Congs, right? And it's going from getting caught, being POW, going into re-education camp and escaping repeatedly. By the 3rd time he escaped, he was out. And I remember something he said is, when they catch you, they know you were in the camp because you have the leeches on your body and you went through the water or something. There was, again, I didn't get direct stories. I always just got bits and pieces. But you had leeches, and that's how they found you. And then they got to bring you back. And then they have to make you admit that you came out, or they let you go. But they torture you to admit it. So I remember one thing he told me is him and his friend got out together, and they separated him. And he says he's got his fingers in this bamboo thing that they're twisting, and he's just about to do it, to give up. But then they let him go, and his friend gave up, and then his friend went back in. So that was the time he said he went from Vietnam and walked through Cambodia, which at the time, people, if you're familiar with that era, there was a killing fields in Cambodia. So he walked through there to get to Thailand, but at the same time, for some reason, he had to fight in Cambodia too. And I know for him, being in Cambodia was worse than Vietnam. So this is the point where he said he's living on like eating monkey brains and eating whatever he can, drinking his pee just to live, right? Stuff like that. And there's rivers where it's just full of dead bodies. And to drink this water, you have to boil it with lemongrass, he said, because the water smelled so bad, right? And then you finally make it to Thailand, and they think he's a Viet Cong in Thailand when the military sees him, right? And then they take him to some place and they just beat the hell out of him for a couple of days, trying to get him to say he's Viet Cong. But just by chance, some American soldiers who recognized him and got him out of that somehow. And that's how he ended up being going to a refugee camp somewhere in the Philippines. I don't know. It's just, again, I didn't get the full start to finish story. I just got bits and pieces, but that's what I could piece together this whole time. And so growing up knowing this, then you realize there's nothing I will ever have to do that is that difficult, right? So that being said, it doesn't matter how, whatever's happening here, I'm never going to have to do that. And we live in a place where I don't have to be a child soldier, for one, right? I don't have to fight for my life in that way. And there's just no reason why I can't just, take advantage of already this difficult journey and sacrifice just to get here, and then me being born. If I don't do something worthwhile, then it's kind of just spitting on the face of that whole thing, right? And that's just kind of how I've felt about this my entire life growing up. And why, what's the hardest thing I have to do now? Write a letter to someone to ask to buy their house, right? Deal with
a squatter occasionally.
Deal with a squatter sometimes. Deal with a difficult landlord laws. These are the hardest things I have to deal with, right? And when you compare that to, do I have to boil this water with lemongrass, right? It just makes it sound very easy.
Yeah, dead body soup.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're not drinking that, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not being shot at trying to leave this country.
A perspective check
Yeah.
forevermore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think the perspective is really interesting too, that to honor that effort to have gotten through that and got you here, to honor that is hardwired in you.
Yeah.
That to do something with your life in repayment for what it took to actually get you here and living in this part of the world versus that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
There's no reason why we can literally do, for the most part, what we want here and live however we want. There's no reason not to do it. For someone to have to do through all of that, I think my dad's education stopped at like 3rd grade. I mean, that's might be self-inflicted a little bit. He told me some of how he went to some Catholic school, and the last day he went and he hid in a tree because the teachers used to hit you when you got your stuff wrong. He hid in this tree, and when the teacher walked out, he peed in the teacher from the tree, and then he ran away and he never came back. So there's just little things like that. But still, 3rd grade, 4th grade education is what he got, and then he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the middle of a war as a child, right?
his life seemed to represent a core value through his actions, through his sacrifices, through his courage. Do you remember any discussions of the hardwiring, Jesse? Do you remember any of the discussions with your dad of this is an important piece, pay attention? Or is it just by observation of what he did and what he's about that formed you?
I think it's more just it's observation, and it's just hearing the tail end or the little short stories of this happened in this place, this happened in that place. We went there when I was in, I think I was 15, 16 the first time. I went to Vietnam, we went as a family, and he went to this place that used to be his bunker, and there's hardly anything left there. It's all just kind of, overgrowth next to this town, right? But for him, it was really important to see it. And I didn't realize what was happening then, but I understand now this is something, it probably gave him closure being there a little bit, right? So there's that. I mean, it's just, there's never been just a sit-down discussion of all this, and there's not been a direct, you need to do this because of these reasons. It's just, these are just things I knew that happened, right? I know he fell out of a helicopter. I know he got hit by a car. I know all these little things. I know he has scars from the war, shrapnel, and whatever else it is, right? But, I don't have just a complete timeline, but knowing all that, that's what gives the perspective. So there's just such a slim chance that he even got here, because how many people died doing the same thing? And even with my mom too. My mom, when she had me young, she was 19 when she had me. But before that, as a teenager, she got this really bad car accident where she was ejected from the vehicle, right? And she should have died in the accident. So both of my parents had such a slim chance of even surviving, let alone having children, right? Where that me existing is just such it's so rare of an occurrence of what happened that I can't waste my life because it was so difficult for my life to even start, right?
What about you, Patrick? What are your earliest memories and some of the lessons in hardwiring that you feel looking back that we're soaking in?
Well, my parents came to this country in the late 70s. And I think one of the things that Jesse and I have in common that we really hang on to is that nothing that we're going to do in our lives is going to be harder than anything that my parents or our parents had to go through, period, right? And how lucky and blessed are we to have all of the opportunities that are available to us that we take for granted. I mean, no matter how poor you are in this country, we all shit in a clean bowl of water, right?
Right.
And that's such a luxury that, again, we take for granted.
Right.
My parents were born in 1954, a year after the ceasefire of the Korean War. And at that time, Korea was one of the poorest countries in the nation. Believe it or not, kind of just during those times, South Korea was getting foreign aid from the Philippines even, right? And so just to think about kind of the situation that was there and happening. It's really hard for maybe some of us to really fathom. My parents came to this country with really nothing but the clothes on their backs. And, again, how hard was it? How hard is it to live somewhere to think you're going to leave everything that you know behind to go live somewhere in a search of a better life? And, some of us might think that that sounds kind of risky, but to them it was like opportunity. And my dad's probably one of the hardest working people that I know. My brother's the second hardest working person that I know. And then I'm like the lazy one in the family. But those two really taught me about hard work and perseverance. My mom taught me about patience and compassion. So I try to embody both of those things, or both sides of them, and honor them in that way. My dad, again, hardest working guy that I know. And he's always worked a blue-collar job. He's always doing something very physical, doing something with his hands. And my dad retired a couple of years ago, but the company that he worked for has had, several different acquisitions. They've been bought out. And there's only one guy that's like consistently keeping his job, and it was my dad. And my dad always said, I don't speak English very well. I can't even write an email. Literally right up to the point that my dad retired, I was writing his work emails for him. And he said to me, but you know why I've always kept my job? Because I work harder than anybody else. And he would say to me, Patrick, you speak English. You know how to write an email. If you just worked hard, is there nothing that you couldn't do in this life, right? Is there nothing that you can't achieve? And so I've always kind of carried that mindset with me. And that, we really do have it easy, and it really can be that easy. And if we just work hard, there's nothing that we can't do.
I have sat with many who the perspectives that you share of life almost being like a free pass, like somebody
Yeah.
has given you this opportunity to go for it, and there's just such a perspective that there's no looking at things saying, wow, I'm playing not to lose, because there's no way you will ever get to a place as difficult as they have seen.
Yeah.
Like you said, our toilet water is sacred in most parts of the world. It's just
Yeah.
it's clean and it's bright and beautiful.
Yeah.
To me, with that perspective of I have nothing to lose and everything to gain, there is the floor is acceptable. If it all went, everything went wrong, that's still a privileged place to be. To me, that perspective, that launching pad, allows you to just go for it.
Yeah.
And to me, in part, it explains what everybody that knows you is seeing. It's a disruptive going for it in life.
Yeah.
Not playing this defense and fear of losing things, but a very aggressive, forward-moving attitude in life.
Yeah.
And to me, this history explains that. It's amazing. From a real estate perspective, segue me into your first awarenesses of real estate. And I think Jesse, you got into it before Patrick, a little bit older. Walk me through why real estate. Why did real estate enter the playing field?
I feel like I almost kind of fell into it by accident. I was, I think, 19 when I started in mortgage, like a loan officer, mortgage origination. residential mortgage. And this is kind of right at the start of the mortgage crisis. Like, we didn't know at the time, but you can look back now, 2006, 2007, 2005, around there is when it's kind of the peak, when you can basically just do whatever you wanted in mortgage. You know, had I known even a little bit more at the time when I started, I probably would have bought all kinds of real estate. But I started doing loans with someone who, it was the older sister of a kid I grew up with, and she was in mortgage. Seemed like doing a bunch of loans and got us started. There was probably 4 or 5 of us friends in the group that were like, oh, we want to do this too. She's like, all right, well, here's a list of just basically call the phone book and ask them if they want to refinance their house. And that's how the mortgage started. I eventually closed my first loan, and I was in community college at the time, the only year I went to school. I closed the first loan. I think I got paid like $5,000 or $8,000. I'm like, I'm not going back to school. That school's stupid. Like, this thing took me a month, and look what I made out of it, right? So that's really where it started. It was in mortgage, and I'm not very detail oriented, so mortgage is all detail, right? And I made this transition from, I don't want to do mortgage. I want to go, I'm going to sell the house instead because it looks easier than doing mortgage. That's what I thought. But so I got my real estate license. And actually, my dad suggested I get the real estate license. My dad was in prison at the time. It wasn't very long, but he was there. And I'd talk to him frequently. He said, you should get your license and you should do what this person's doing. All right. So I got my license and I started selling real estate as an agent, representing seller, representing buyer. I still did mortgage at the same time, but I was selling houses, and I thought, this is great. I'd sold, I think I did like 20 deals in my first year between the real estate and the mortgage combined. And, I made a pretty good income for being, at that time, I think 20 or 21 maybe. And I thought, this isn't too difficult. It's better than working at, McDonald's wouldn't hire me, actually. So I thought it was better than McDonald's. And, I bought 2 houses by that time, and they were just off the MLS retail deals, and I didn't know any better. But when things started, the market started changing, quick, right? And again, you don't know you're in the middle of a real estate crash when you're in the middle of it. Maybe some people did, but I didn't know. And I was going from selling at least a deal every month to, every other month, and then every 3, and then nothing, right? And I have these 2 houses, and I didn't rent the other one. It's another story. But I knew it was going to get difficult when I had missed the first mortgage payment, thinking, yeah, I'm going to be able to catch up, right? Just only one deal will make the difference, right? And I missed the second. By the third one, I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. And I started looking at, maybe we'll do a loan mod. Maybe I'll just file bankruptcy and not really mean it, just so they stop foreclosure. All these little games we were playing. I stretched that out for like a year before they foreclosed on it. But I ended up foreclosing on that house that I was living in. I short sold the other one. My car was repossessed on my birthday, actually. It's a funny story. 3 in the morning, I think. 3 in the morning on my birthday. There's a pound on the door. And I thought it was the police, without getting too into detail. By this time, I'm doing things I could have got arrested for. So I thought it was the police banging on my door, because it's like pounding on it, right? And that's what they do when they're raiding your house. They pound your door or they kick it down. But he's pounding on the door, and I'm like, oh shit, all right, here it is. Open the door, the guy's like, and I'm not small, right? There's a step down off of my entry door, and the guy's still towering over me, taking up the entire door. And he's like, I'm here for the Lexus. I'm like, oh shit, well, here's the key. So, it was I can look back at it fondly. I really can. It's not, even at the time, I didn't feel like it was that big of a deal, right? And and I wasn't thinking about the perspective I have, just knowing like this, whatever, this is what it is, right? And at least it's happening to everybody, not just me.
I mean, you kind of have to think you knew it was coming, right?
Oh, of course. I mean, you don't pay your car for 4 months.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting in the driveway. Yeah, I know what they're
And you're not going to put up a fight with this guy.
Right, no. Yeah. And even if he was small, I wouldn't have put up a fight. But it was just extra insult to injury that the guy was 10 times my size, right? So, and here's the key. Let me get my stuff out, please. And that was it. But, but this is, let me think about it. I don't remember what year it was. This is 08, 09 maybe by this time. And, I'm barely hanging on, clinging on to this business. And I made a call to a expired listing who just happened to be someone I knew who was flipping houses, and he was still doing it through the crash. Not as many as he had, but still making it work. And he's like, hey, you want to list this house for me? Can you do it for like $2,000 flat fee? I got like 4 or 5 houses for you to list. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll do that. That's not a problem. $2,000, I'll at least put gas in the car. So I started listing his houses, and it ended up turning into, I think in 1 year, at one point, it was like 40 or 50 of his houses I listed for him. But more importantly, I got to watch this process of buying this beat up house and turning into something that somebody wants, right? And, got a kind of a upfront view of what is he doing? How are you buying these? How are you financing it? What are you doing with it how do you even remodel it, right? And that just turned into, eventually I bought one, right? And he helped me do this, and he showed me how to do this. And I still do flat fee listing at the same cost for this person now, and I'll do it forever, right? Because that person basically pulled me out of the fire, really. And because of that, I got to watch someone who's still does a lot of flip projects and, learn that part of the business until we eventually figured out, we need to start keeping houses and keeping real estate, because what are we doing otherwise? This is just a better paying job, but it's still a job. And that's when we decided to start keeping real estate.
I get fascinated by the roads that lead into something, and sometimes the motivation that starts the ball rolling has really nothing to do with a big vision of wealth or this or that. It's just a job. It's survival. It gets the ball rolling, and one thing leads to another. That saying, you can't steer a parked car, right? When you get moving, life has a way of unfolding. What about you, Patrick, with the real estate thing?
Yeah, so I got into real estate in 2015. Jesse's pretty much been doing it right out of high school. And at that time, I was working a W-2 job. I was the idiot that went to college. And, I guess just a few years before that, the real estate crash was still very fresh in a lot of people's minds, kind of in the, 12, 13, 14. Economy hadn't quite picked up yet. And so, as a college graduate with a degree in psychology, it's like, what are you really going to be doing, right? So while I was going to college, I was working in retail. And at that time, I was making okay money. And even after college, I saw all my friends that were graduating barely making 30 or 40,000. And I thought I was doing okay, so I just kept doing that. The last W-2 job that I had was working for AT&T, and I was trying to do like the corporate thing. And eventually I kind of just got tired of it. I was tired of having a boss, and there's all of these people in an org chart that think that they know how to, run this business, right? And there's all of these competing priorities. And I think eventually I kind of just said, I don't think I really want to do this anymore. And so 2015 comes around, I call Jesse. He's now back on the upswing, right? And by the way, while I was still in high school, Jesse had like the gold Rolex, 3-piece suit, driving a $120,000 car. So
I had 10 ounces of gold jewelry, actually, at that time.
Yeah.
10 or 12 ounces. It was just ridiculous.
But, Jesse was now back on the upswing. And, even though Jesse had been doing real estate the whole time, he's never once tried to talk me into it or recruit me into it or anything like that. And I just asked the question, like, hey, is this something that you think that I can do? And we talked about it for a while, and he goes, okay, just think about it. And I said, well, I already quit my job. And I didn't have anything lined up, so I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. At the time, I wanted to flip houses because that's what Jesse was doing. And Jesse said, there's kind of like three different people in this business. There's, the agent, they understand transactions, but they don't really have any money. They don't know how to do the work. You've got the investor that has the money, doesn't understand transactions, doesn't know how to do the work. And then there's the contractor, right? Fill in the blank.
And the lender. There was a lender.
And maybe there's a lender as well, fill in the blanks. And he told me, okay, so you have all of these people and they all have these knowledge gaps, right? Maybe go get your license, go be an agent, learn how to do transactions really well, because when the other stuff comes into play, you really know and understand transactions, right? And you can grow into flipping and doing these other things. And I said, okay, that's a pretty good idea. And I got my real estate license. I became an agent, and I had this annoying boss at AT&T, but I learned a lot from him. And I remember he used to always say, "You're always interviewing for a job that you don't really know exists." And I always knew what it meant, but it couldn't be more true after the fact, because when I got my real estate license, what I found was I had a lot of people in my sphere of influence that approached me and said, "Hey, I think I'm ready to buy a house. I know that you're brand new at this, but you're the hardest working guy that I know. And you're the only person that I trust to do this." And so I really kind of built my business around that, and it started with retail, and I still do retail, but that's kind of where it started and where it blossomed from. Yeah.
Really interesting. When I think about you guys now, I'm fast forwarding. You own a brokerage. You're the managing broker of Agency One,
Mm-hmm.
soon to be rebranded with a new name,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you've got a real estate company.
Yeah.
You've got depth of experience in acquisition, flipping for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You've grown a portfolio of rental properties. You've grown from minute one. There's been this vertical growth in your real estate career. If you were to sit down with somebody just learning the words real estate, like brand new,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell them are the big rocks that you have to understand to be a successful real estate entrepreneur?
The people that do really well in this business are the people who truly believe that they're in control of their own destiny. And from all aspects, you take ownership of the success in this business, but you can also take ownership of the failures in this business as well, or the mistakes that you make, right? I think in this business, it really feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. And it's really, really hard to gain momentum in this business. And not only is it hard to gain momentum, once you also stop, it's so easy for that momentum to fall backwards onto you, right? That boulder to fall back on you. And I think most people end up either quitting or burning out before they get that first rotation that really happens, right? Let alone getting it over the hill. But I think that if you can persevere and actually get it over that hill, then you know that you could at least do this business, right? Or at least find some success in this business. I think that's kind of the first thing that I always tell people about. The second thing is our job is really lonely, which is hard for a lot of people. And I think that this is why part of our partnership really works out, because we at least have each other. And if you are not part of a tribe, or if you're not building your tribe, I think it's also very difficult to find success in this business, because I don't care who you are, you're not doing it alone. And so if people can really grasp and understand those two concepts and then take ownership of that, again, I think you'll find success.
That's really amazing things. Take a stab at this one. It's quoted from Tom Newman, but I've embraced it my whole life, that real estate is just the clothing that finance wears. Deal structuring, finance. You both work very, very hard at understanding the toolbox and deal structuring and the numbers of this game. I think people get very intimidated by real estate because they say, well, I just am not good at numbers. And yet you're a psychology major, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a speech communication major. It can
Yeah.
be learned, but talk to me about deal structuring.
Yeah.
As a standalone knowledge block in this business.
You know, I don't even feel like I've been doing this properly until we started just dabbling in that. Right? And it's only been, what, a year and a half maybe? And really it just, it's not that I'm great with numbers either, but what's if you can break this, if you can pick one thing that makes all that, brings all that together, is just figuring out what somebody needs and what they really want. And then if you have at least just a basic understanding of some of our tools in this toolbox, you can usually solve any problem that they have with whatever tools that we have at our disposal. Any problem relating to this property they want to sell, right? The deal structure becomes very easy when you talk with someone and just listen to what they have to say. And, and this is something that's changed dramatically, I think, in the way that I'm dealing with sellers and the way that I'm looking for property. Is I'm not just trying to bang out as many contacts and dials and numbers and door knocks and whatever it is as I can just to find one who's just ready to sell right now. I'm talking to as fewer people that I've ever talked to try and buy real estate, but these conversations take hours sometimes, where I'm basically just letting them speak to me, because everyone loves to talk about themselves if you just give them an opportunity. And when you let somebody do that, you're going to figure out a whole lot about this person and a whole lot about what they need. And if we can listen to what they need, and again, we have some basic understanding of these different ways of structuring these deals, then we're going to be able to put something together for them that's going to give them exactly what they need, whether they thought that's how they wanted to do it or not. And oftentimes when we're done speaking, I'll be there 2 or 3 hours in front of somebody in their living room, and I'll be most of that time just them talking about everything, and the last 10 minutes are like, well, okay, what if we did this? And they're usually, that sounds like a great idea. And that's the whole
Yeah.
negotiation is, all right, that's great. I'll this is a great talk. I'll see you later. By the way, here, let's do it this way. And they love it, and then it's fine. And it's a win-win for everybody. They win. They're getting what they want. They're doing it in a way that they never even conceived was possible. And we're doing it, and we're winning by being able to acquire this property in a way that works for us. And whether we keep this house or not, we have the good debt at that point.
Yeah. I think so many people they're just so obsessed with the dollar amount, right? And what I mean is from the acquisition standpoint, the person trying to buy, said property, and they just obsess over that dollar amount. And if that's the only lever that you're trying to pull in this deal that you're trying to negotiate, then you're just leaving a whole buffet on the table, right? And for the seller, I mean, I think in almost every acquisition scenario that we've been in, it's not the money that's the motivation. It's what do they need to do with the money? And they usually think that they need X amount of dollars to go execute Y, when that's not always the case. And so when you're there and you're having a conversation with them, and you're just, a lot of times we're not even really talking about the house or the deal to begin with. We're sharing pictures of our kids. We're talking about their kids, their grandkids, where they grew up, and we learn every single thing about them. And like I had one situation where a lady said, I have another offer on the table that's more money than this one, but I want to sell to you because I trust you. And I think that's pretty powerful.
I think that there's a seminar right there. I mean, there really is, and you said it so well, Patrick. That I think the assumption people make is that this is all about just agreeing on a number,
Yeah.
a price. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. What's the number? But with some time and discussion, you recognize that that's almost not even something that's on their mind. It's a time frame issue. It's a concern about this or that that's really the issue. I've had people say, well, really, I don't really even want to sell my house.
Yeah.
I don't want to move. I'm just trying to solve this problem over here.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Aristotle, discover all available means of agreement. All of a sudden, you gain a little puzzle piece and you just set it on the table. And then you gain another puzzle piece and you set it on the table. And the more discussion, the more understanding you have, all of a sudden you look down, there's 20 pieces on the table, and you start seeing it's forming a picture. It's like, oh, I see how we can put this together. What if we did this? What about that? And sometimes, like you said, you talk for 2 hours, and then in 5 minutes, poof, there's the deal. And they go, oh, wow, that would be great. Fantastic. And you shake hands, and you go draft it up, and problem solved. You do have to come in with a toolbox.
Yeah.
A surgeon walks into surgery with a tray of all available tools because he doesn't quite know exactly what he's going to see when he goes in. So let's have all the tools ready, and you know how to use all the tools. You know what they're for, but you just don't know which ones you're going to use until you sort of get into it. Well, that interviewing, that face-to-face, that connective skills, you have this partnership. It's a very, very different skill sets that you naturally carry with you. Do you divide and conquer who's going in? Are you going in together? With this type of seller, this is better suited for Jesse. With this type of person, it's better suited for Patrick. How do you divide and conquer the roles of your partnership to sync in any given situation?
I think a lot of people think that Jesse and I are really different, which maybe from the outside you can maybe make that argument.
You're twins.
But I think that we hold on to the same core philosophies, though, right? Maybe the execution of that is just a little bit different. I think where Jesse and I really complement each other is Jesse's someone who is not going to hesitate to take action. But while taking action, there's usually also some collateral damage. And whereas for me, I'm kind of a planner, right? It takes time for me to put something together. I want things to be perfect. I want the execution to be perfect. Well, if Jesse's already out the gate, right? Then I'm kind of playing cleanup now, right? And so I like to think of myself as the person that adds a little polish or refinement to whatever it is that we're trying to do. But I think at the end of the day, we believe in the same things, which is why the partnership works.
Different ways of going about the same thing.
Right. And, I think you say this sometimes, but I might be just taking the words out of your mouth, but you like to do things kind of by force, whereas I like to do things by influence and make them think that that's what they wanted from the start, right?
Yeah, and it's the same. You get the same thing at the end. It's just right.
Yeah.
I think one thing that makes this work, which people like you said earlier, people ask us about should I take a partner on this or that. It's hard to explain how our partnership really works, and I want to do what's completely best for Patrick on anything we're working on. and I put whatever I think is going to benefit him first before I think about what's going to benefit me. And oftentimes, whatever's going to benefit both of us is what's there. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if I had to choose between, is Patrick going to do well out of this thing we're working on, or am I? I'm going to make sure it's him before it's me. And I think he's probably the same way. And we both want what's best for the other party. And even if I like, if there was a disagreement for some reason and we have to part way, I'll just give him everything. It doesn't matter. I rather it benefits someone else, because the way I look at it is, it really wasn't that hard to get where I at right now, so we can just do it over again, right? So I genuinely want to just make sure, and maybe it's because I'm older and I'm maybe a little bit of an older brother role since we were kids, but everything I'm doing, it has to benefit him some way, the other partner. So, and if you can find a partner who will do that for you, then I think the partnership will be, and it's genuine, the partnership will work out. But, there's a lot of times where people get in partnerships where the person wants what's best for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And, sometimes you can't see that in the beginning, but I don't think there's any other reason why a partnership would end other than one party wants what's best for them over both of them.
And I think for me, it's, I mean, it's exactly the same, right? And I mean, you basically gave me a new life, is really what you did. And so there's gratitude there, right? And so everything that I'm doing, I also feel the same way. It's kind of in service of you too, right? And I want this to be in your benefit, and we agree on that, right? And I think that's why it's worked.
You guys have an outward reputation of being almost like a good guy, bad guy kind of thing.
A bad guy, worse guy.
Or like you say, the wrecking ball and the cleanup crew. But what I've grown to appreciate and really see and really understand is that you're both authentically yourselves.
Yeah.
And yet you're not in competition with one another. You're truly complementing one another. The fact that you go about things differently allows you to connect with different people, allows you to get jobs done in different ways. And sometimes when you approach somebody together, I can just assume that somebody's going to be naturally gravitating to the other, maybe more in a situation. So you're covering more ground with your diversity of your way of handling it. Sometimes somebody's going to be slower, more methodical, more gentle, in need of that kind of care. And I can just see Patrick would sort of take over, and other people are like, we just got to get this done right now, let's go. And Jesse's like, let's do it in 5 minutes, let's go, here we go. And that sort of more aggressive approach. In part of what we see out there and what I've gotten to know about you, you're also sort of a front runner when it comes to stirring it up in a lot of different areas. Take, for example, the world of brokerage, right?
Yeah.
Brokerage has a name of, this is what this looks like. Real estate brokerage is an office with office meetings and floor time and agents, and here's kind of the protocol of how it works in a real estate office.
Yeah.
Yours doesn't look anything like that. Tell me about that. Is that purposeful, or is it just consistent with how you see the world, or do you see an opportunity there? Why is your office so different? How is it so different than any other real estate office in the Northwest?
Well, Jesse and I both started on the traditional path. We were in that office that you just spoke about, right? And over the years, or the decades now, we've come to despise the traditional brokerage model. And as real estate people, we're supposed to be advocates for property ownership. And yet all of a sudden, when you want to become the property owner or the owner of many properties, now they view you as a liability. And it makes no sense. And so we wanted to create something where people can build their personal brands really embody the entrepreneurial spirit, because at the end of the day, we got into this business because we don't want to have a boss. We want to do whatever it is that we want to do, and we want to empower people to be able to do that. And so that authenticity that you talk about, we're really prideful about that, and we want other people to be able to embody that as well. And so I think that that's really where we started.
Yeah, I don't think I ever intended to be a disruptor of anything. Really, what it is, it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. I'm in the back of my mind. I want to do what I want to do with my own property and with whatever it is. And there's always this thing where my dad, another thing he had to do was when he's in these camps, you got to toil in these fields. You do some kind of farming or something all day. They give you one bowl of rice. That's what you're supposed to eat for the day. And it's moldy or it's bad or whatever. So what they did was they'd eat like grubs and stuff they find toiling. But if you got caught eating these bugs, then they beat you for it. And I'm thinking, anytime I want to do what I want and someone tells me I can't, my dad did not eat bugs and drink piss to get here, so Jim Ackland at Keller Williams can tell me I can't sell my own house off market, right? And that's why I take those so personally. It just pisses me off when someone's like, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do that because of some stupid rule that doesn't hurt anybody, right? And I think selling my homes off market's a perfect example of that. Or wholesaling real estate and you're an agent. There's some of these people who believe you can't do that, you're not allowed, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. Don't tell me what the fuck to do, because you go run your office how you want and leave me alone, because what I'm doing doesn't hurt anybody. It helps somebody. So with that constantly in the back of my mind, I guess it almost makes me, I feel like in the world right now where we are, it makes me an extremist, because I believe in absolute freedom of what I'm doing if I'm not hurting anyone else. And if some regulatory body tells me I can't, like my RV pads, for example, in city of Lakewood, I have a disabled veteran I'm renting to who can't get approved by anybody. And I have to evict this person because this code enforcement guy doesn't like it because I did it and he told me not to. And that's the only reason. And it's just, it all goes back to that. Don't tell me what to do with my property. Right? And I think that core belief of mine translates into our office. It translates into the way we run our brokerage, where we want people to be themselves. We want them to run their own business the way they want. And again, just don't hurt anyone. Don't cause harm. If you're helping the parties involved, then do whatever you want with it. And there's no one who's going to tell me I can't do these things. I'm going to do it anyway.
And something that you bring up a lot is, it's like, why are we even doing real estate in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we in it to be in the rat race and to stay on the hamster wheel, or do we want to actually go out and buy real estate and become real acquisition experts? And the two coincide with each other. When you go out and buy real estate and you get better at it, you don't think that that's going to translate into helping your customers better and serving them better? Of course it does. They go hand in hand. And so it's really a holistic approach to real estate, where there's so many people who think that, let's just take, being an agent versus wholesaling. You can make an excellent living doing both of those things individually, when really they're just tools in your toolbox, right? Or I like to say a lane on your freeway, and they're not exclusive paths to one another. They're just lanes on your freeway. The more lanes you have stacked up, you're going to get to your ultimate destination faster. But when one of these lanes close down in your business, or even two or three, your business is still moving forward. So we want people to have a retail lane. We want people to have an acquisition lane, a buy and hold lane, a wholesale lane, a creative finance lane, if you will, right? We want our agents to have all of those things and to also be exposed to it. And when the traditional office, they view all of these things as liabilities because, well, number one, they're not doing any of this. The managing broker at your traditional office probably doesn't even own any real estate. No offense to anybody out there. But
actually, yeah, offense to everybody out there.
Yeah. And so, whereas we're out there in the trenches, we're doing this stuff on a daily basis, we don't view it as liability because we already know and understand it.
Think on that topic of liability, it's a defensive posture. It's protect yourself world that we live in, everywhere you go. And the letter of the law is what governs the law. In other words, when you switch that around and say, I'm not playing this game being afraid, I'm not thinking defense all the time, and I have a much more open playing field of how I do things in the spirit of doing right and doing good, I can see that theoretical playing field is much greater, it's much more productive. And yet, the structure that we all live in is the structure we all live in. And this is the real challenge, I think, of entrepreneurship, is that by definition, entrepreneurs want to play by their own rules. And I being one of them. and yet being at it as long as I have, and being the first guy in the door to say, hey, I'm going to do it this way because I believe that this is right. It helps everybody. There's no downside. Let's go. Well, sometimes you take a bullet when you do that.
Yeah.
And so as much as I hate saying it, there has to be some wisdom in where you make a run at it, in where you get bold, and in areas of finance, in areas of dealing with federally insured lenders, and areas where the consequences of the letter of the law is what is going to be put in front of you. It's did this record on Monday or Tuesday?
Yeah.
It doesn't, substantively, it makes no difference at all. And yet, one is as white as the driven snow. The other, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how this business, I think, it pulls on against the natural tendencies to just go create and make it happen and treat people well and all go and all positive. There are real issues and constraints out there that necessarily cause you to have to pull back from what normally you might want to do. And this is the balance. And I think there in younger years, damn the doc, let's go. I think that over time, though, you learn what areas do I have to show a lot more attention to detail, because there's exposure, even though it's unperceived. There's exposure. And to me, that's the challenge of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
We're optimistic. We go create. We go get things done. We do it and leave a trail of enthusiasm. But the infrastructure that we operate inside of oftentimes doesn't embrace that.
Yeah.
And it actually penalizes that. And so there's the great challenge. And yet you're still leading the way, and you're still known as being disruptive and fearless. And yet I would also contend with wisdom. You've surrounded yourself with people who check your math, a good team of attorneys and coaches and people to kind of keep an eye on things, because even the most talented horse needs a certain amount of parameters and reins, or it'll hurt itself, right? At least that's my feeling after all these years. So in a sense, I feel there are times where my role that I've been blessed to have with you guys is to just keep the reins just enough tight to keep us moving without hurting ourselves sometimes, right? Yeah. The you guys have had the in my view of it, it's quite a big deal to be asked to be in the kitchen of Power Players, to be TAs at Power Players. Take me in the back room of Power Players, which, this intensive you've attended, but you've been in the kitchen of it working with
Yeah.
a whole room of entrepreneurs, which is really what you do in your brokerage as well.
Yeah.
You're working with entrepreneurs. Tell me about that role of being on the teaching side of this business.
Yeah. I mean, you're managing so many personalities and strong personalities, right? Because again, you're in a room with 60 other entrepreneurs that all want to do their thing, right? And how do you manage that? And how do you manage all the personalities? It's definitely a tall order, but I think everyone comes with their egos checked, and there's humility there, and I think that's the only reason why it works. And this is kind of your thing, but there's no assholes at Power Players, right? And it really shows itself in that way. For anyone who's interested in Power Players, you ask someone who's gone to Power Players, they'll all say it's very hard to describe what Power Players really is. I think the best definition that I can come up with is that it's a language, and you're going there to understand the language and the customer service aspect of creative deal structuring. And, we have a mutual friend, Brian Blessing. I watched him for years do all of the craziest real estate acquisitions that I've ever seen. And on paper, I understand how the deal works, but I didn't understand, well, how do you actually get it to work with the seller though? And there's a huge customer service portion of my knowledge base that was just completely absent, that I couldn't put two and two together. When I realized that doing this means that you're taking on a customer service role, then everything changed for me.
That's it.
Yeah.
The connection, the puzzle pieces, the understanding the language of your audience, and then matching those with the tools and the structures and the strategies that actually move to a completion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you hit something there, Patrick, that I've never heard anybody say it better than that. But the one component that makes something like Power Players work, which, it's an intensive, it's long days. But it's that willingness for hard driving type A people to check their ego at the door and to have a certain amount of humility in that we're here to learn.
Yeah.
Right here, we're all the same. We're the same. We're going to work together. We're going to give everything we've got as well as take everything in around us. And that humility is the screening process of no arrogant people here, no tight pants. It's got to be that we're all here to learn with a sense of growth, and humility is the focus. But isn't that what you look for when you think of bringing people into your organization, into your brokerage? Is that one asshole can mess it up.
Yeah.
Right? One arrogant tight pants can mess it up. And so that we're all working together in support of each other and teaching each other.
Yeah.
That's culture. That camaraderie, that togetherness is what makes your office awesome.
Yeah.
And I contend what makes Power Players awesome after 37 groups of 50. I mean, it's an amazing group of people over the country that this is the common thread. That willingness to grow and learn, growth being the grail. And how do you grow? You surround yourself by people that are also growing, who are pushing you. So that's a big deal, I think. Your portfolio of real estate is changing in its focus.
Yeah.
It's you've had a lot of success in the single family world, in the small multiplex world. You've expanded on that with various forms of DADUs and ADUs and RV pads, and you've maximized sort of that model. But it's changing and it's growing in its vision, given an increasing amount of tools and given a change of realities of landlord-tenant law and the climate in general. Talk to me about the evolution and the focus of where you're going with your own acquisitions right now in real estate.
Yeah, I think anytime that we're looking at a property now, it needs 3 legs, right? And you say this best, you can't have a stool with 1 leg on it, right? So the first leg that it needs, a cash leg, right? It needs to bring in or have the ability to bring in some income. Number 2, there needs to be some expandability. And I don't mean building on something or adding more units to it. We need expandability where we've got first position lien slots, right? Where we have garages where we can park money, okay? So being able to, let's say, condo out an apartment building, condo out a mobile home park, an RV park, that's what we need. And then the number 3 thing that we need is a wealth building leg. So something that we're going to keep long term. We can be smart enough to keep long term and have it work in our portfolio.
And the financing has to mirror that long term goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we live in an area here that is just increasingly hostile to landlords and just property owners in general. We live in an area where I feel like general lawlessness is just becoming the norm. And even just before coming here, last night I had the 4th break-in in a week. This is 4 different properties, vacant properties. This is 3 different counties. This is 4 different cities. I'm not being targeted personally. These are all owned by a different LLC. They're not, can't really be all tied to me unless you know already. And even if you do, you wouldn't know. But this is just the new normal where 2 of these houses, one of them we found these drug addicts they broke open a lockbox and they got the key in the lock, but they were so high they couldn't turn the lock. And so they just shit on the driveway and left. And I don't know what it is about shitting on everything other than a toilet, but this is really common where not just me, it happens to a lot of people around here. And yesterday we had a break-in on a flip project where they just broke our sliding glass door. We got a lot of nice big windows here. They broke the sliding glass door, and there's nothing to steal here. And I didn't see any sleeping bags. I didn't see any cigarette butts. So
They just did it just to
they just
do
did
it.
it just to do it.
It was just
And-
vandalism.
Right. And
Yeah.
that alone, a kid throws a rock through the window, whatever, I can live with that. But this is the 4th time in a week, and it's just getting to a breaking point where I don't even want to own stuff here anymore. I don't want to have to deal with all this bullshit where we're constantly being bombarded by people breaking in, and the weather changing, I think, has something to do with our uptick in this activity. I just haven't had so much of it at one time where it's almost overwhelming just because it's infuriating that this keeps happening. But we're in a place where we're about to have new laws passed in a city where the majority of our rentals are, and it's going to make it so difficult to just be a landlord there that it's not worth the effort anymore. So I think what we're going to be doing is going to be unloading most of our portfolio here and using this cash to just buy in a better market, somewhere where it's not just the tenants here are against us, the city is against us, the county, the whole state feels like it's against the property owner here.
Yeah.
And it just makes it very difficult to do business. I don't like backing away or backing off of these things because I like part of me likes the conflict to a degree. But I mean, one of these buildings that got broken into this week, they were chased off in the morning and they came back armed in the afternoon. So I don't want to have to constantly be armed and wearing body armor to do real estate. Like I didn't join the SWAT team. I'm trying to just be, a property owner. And if it takes this is something that we need where we literally need to wear body armor to go look at our houses, and I think we're in the wrong area.
Yeah.
And this isn't like a shithole tent. This is just a regular, like Everett, which, it's not like a slum, or it's not a bad area. It's just, this is all along the I-5 corridor. I think from Vancouver, BC to San Francisco. This is just how it is around here. And we're going to be looking elsewhere at this point. So 50 some
you
rentals are
said
leaving.
something, Jesse, that in your nature, it's not in your nature to back down on these things. These sorts of situations, when they truly do affect the way you live your life and you do your business, it gets you fired up. And yet you ask yourself, is this the hill I want to die on?
Literally die on.
So yeah, so many situations that we will contend with as entrepreneurs, we're not in control of ultimately the way things go. Policy, politics, economies, inflations, interest rates, on and on and on. There's just so many things that are out of our control. And it sounds weak, but I actually think for the most part it's smart. Unless it's the hill you absolutely want to die on. If this is something that is so deep in your cause that you are going to spend your life fighting it and trying to turn something around in some strategy, in some way. And I say fight, sometimes fight can be a very strategic, gentle, understanding fight. But cause that you really want to commit yourself to, if it isn't that, as entrepreneurs, we look to the next opportunity. When a door is shutting, another is opening. When this is tightening, something else is loosening, and we've learned to adapt in that way. And so, I can tell you, in the Northwest, you are not the only one who's said, I don't want to be in the providing residential dwelling units for people to live in where I own the structure. Commercial real estate, less affected, more opportunity, right? Light industrial, less issues in that kind of real estate. RV parks, RV storage, mobile home parks where you don't own the roof and the faucet, you own the dirt, less affected. And this is the ducking and weaving that goes on as a real estate entrepreneur. There are times to build and build aggressively, and then there are times you'd be an idiot to dig a hole and start building anything. We have to read the weather and travel accordingly. And I believe that's one of the given skill sets needed to survive as a real estate entrepreneur. All kinds of climate changes, administration changes, jurisdictional changes, landlord-tenant law seems like it's being rewritten on a monthly basis, And so at some point you make a decision that there's better opportunity here or there. Now, that's day in and day out. I really believe that. The exception is if this is a heart issue, if this is something that you so profoundly believe in that you want to make a change in society in this way, okay. But it literally can be the hill you die on. I see more people just packing up and moving to where opportunity is. And physically, or at least product type in this area. And so this is just part, I think, of being an entrepreneur, is recognizing where opportunity is in that time and moving toward that direction decisively and aggressively. And it sounds like that's what's happening. Talk to me about the word scalability in this business. I think it's a big word. In business in general, the energy and effort that might go into X with the same energy and effort and processes could be a 20x.
Yeah.
I think that's something we're actively figuring out right now, where we mainly started with single family. And my thought process at the time is I'd rather have 20 separate houses, because what if I need to sell one? I can sell one fairly easily. And this is because I understood single family real estate and bought and sold several and brokered, several transactions where I thought, well, if I have a fourplex or a 10plex, that might be harder to sell, but really it's not. It isn't harder to sell because people buy that just like they buy anything else.
Yeah.
Price it properly if you need to sell it, and someone's going to buy it. And now that we have started getting into smaller multifamily stuff, something I realized right away was now this property has several sources of income. If one tenant doesn't pay, it's not completely detrimental to that property. Is that property still generating income? I have one right now where I had a tenant not paying for a while. We worked on trying to get him assistance, but they just moved the other day. I didn't have to do eviction because, I think I screened people pretty well where even if they have things like lost jobs and life that happens, the ones that I've chosen are not the people who just sit there and squat and make me fight them to leave. This person left on their own, and that was fine, and we parted ways and on a good note, right? But this person didn't pay for several months, but it didn't, it mattered. But in the big scheme, it didn't matter because 10 other people were paying at this property. So I wasn't put in a position where now I got to come out of pocket every month to cover the overhead of this property. And whereas we've had single family home where people didn't pay, and now that's just the burning a hole every month. And then when they finally leave, now you got to go turn the unit, and you have a vacant property someone can break into, and which that's one of the ones they broke into, and it's just more and more units, more and more sources of income on one property seems like the way that we're shifting toward. And I don't think it's something we intended on in the beginning. It's just a natural progression at this point. We've figured out more units. Even I like entry-level housing. I feel like entry-level anything, medium price point or below, is more of a consistent base of, do we call them customers or tenants? Clientele. That, someone living in an RV paying $900 a month for a pad doesn't care what the stock market's doing for the most part. Now, I have one exception. The guy's a day trader, and I don't know why he lives in the RV. He's got more money than we do, but he rents an RV space, and he's happy with it. And I know it because he showed me the bank statement when we moved in for the income. I'm like, shit, why don't you buy the damn place? But aside from him, most of these people, they don't care. I mean, they care, but the economy doesn't affect their decisions the way someone in a luxury rental would affect their decision.
Yeah.
So we're big on that. We really did, like you said something a minute ago, that if this is something you really believed in. I really believed in trying to figure out affordable ways to do housing. And until this week, when all this bullshit's been happening and just stacking up, I was working with a couple of people, contractor, architect, to try and figure out how can we design this little studio building. We've got a little studio on one of our triplex that's detached. It's like 200 square feet, and the guy rents it for $1,000 a month. He's happy with it. He's military. He goes in and out throughout the year, but he's happy with that space. And I'm like, okay, this space is worth about $1,000 a month around here is very, very affordable. It's very inexpensive. So I wanted to come up with a way. I want to build these little studios that were like, 10 by 10 or 15 by 12, something small that we can be all in and build it for like $30,000, right? And to start plopping them down everywhere, because this was the true purpose of this dadu laws that we're getting right now, is to try and do middle housing. This was the middle housing, and this was going to be a solution I thought was going to benefit this whole area, right? And if I know the second I started doing it, then other people will do it too. And I'm willing to just be the first person to the door and get shot over this, right?
Right.
That, if it didn't work on the first one, whatever, we didn't lose much, right? But, I think this would be something that would work really well here, but I'm not doing it here anymore. We're just constantly beat over the head with everything that you talked about. These the legislation here, the bad tenants, not the good ones, but the the crime and the break-ins and the all the problems.
Well,
So
you have the ability to move, and
yeah,
that is sometimes the solution.
yeah,
I really believe that.
right.
Sometimes that is the solution. Sitting there and continuing to beat your head against the wall
Right.
against all odds isn't smart.
But it is something too. Like I believe in freedom so much of property rights. Like I really believe private property ownership is just a cornerstone of any free society. And I believed it enough that I'm willing to fight these people all the time. But now we're at a point where we can't do it anymore.
Well, I think it's like we have to remember that we can't help anybody unless we're willing to help ourselves first, right? And that's like one of the lessons that I learned from my mom. And so if we're able to stack up our plate just so high that it's just overflowing, it just gives us a better opportunity and a better chance to just help more people, right?
Right.
And so I think with me, I don't have as much heartburn about moving and finding opportunity somewhere else because that's what my parents have always done.
Right.
If something was hard, they packed everything up and they moved. They never hesitated to take a chance somewhere else. And so I think that's why maybe there's like I don't want to call it a disconnect, but maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect between you and I there.
Slight gap on that, yeah. 'Cause
But
I want to keep fighting it, but
yeah,
you're right. You can't beat your head against the wall. And as far as expandability goes, if we can, when we get into this another market where instead of a bunch of these single family homes, we're buying something that's like a 200 pad or 300 pad RV park, for example. If and when we need to raise rent, a $25 or a $50 increase among 300 people, that's not going to usually break the bank for somebody, as opposed to here when we have to increase. And for here, an increase is just to cover costs a lot of times. That's $400 or $500 a month sometimes, right? Where that's much more detrimental to someone than it is than $50 to somebody. So this way we can end up with more ourselves and also lighten the burden on the people we're raising rent on.
Well, and I think from an entrepreneurial perspective too, that scalability of raising something $50 or $75 a month on a single family house does very, very little, but on a 200 pad RV park, you're actually creating some new value, some real new value. The NOI changes, the value changes.
Yeah.
We know that. And so I think there are ways of still accomplishing, your heart for low income type housing. I mean, I don't know that anybody can live cheaper in this country than at an RV park where, any reasonable RV you could buy, $5,000 to $10,000 RV that could be financed on a parking space that might cost $500 to $700 a month to hook it up, and your utilities. Pretty hard to live much cheaper than that. And so as entrepreneurs, we can still feel good about providing that kind of opportunity for people and yet still playing at least a game where we have a chance to be successful ourselves.
Yeah.
When the deck is truly stacked against you, you have to notice that. That's wisdom.
Yeah.
It's just like the guy that shows up to repossess your car. It's like, even if you wanted to fight him, you wouldn't. You're outmatched. He's down one step and he's still a foot taller. That's a big guy.
He's more than a foot.
Let's just call it for what it is,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like sometimes that's live to fight another day.
Yeah.
Reset up, re-go, retool, look at where the opportunity is. And that, to me, is entrepreneurship. Is Geisel describes it as dexterous and deft. The ability to duck and weave and maneuver to the reality of what's happening. Tell me a bit about back to your office. You have adopted within your office and offering to the people who know you a training that you call Walls and Wallets.
Yeah.
Just tell me about that, with that course that it happens over the course of a couple months. Give me a picture of that training.
Yeah, it's a 16-week accountability group that we have. But of course, there's a huge educational component to it as well. And again, the need for this also came out from just our despise for the traditional real estate model. And I think oftentimes what we found with these coaching things or these guru things, they get put on really with the purpose of the people who are leading it really trying to get in the middle of whatever deal that you're working on or to try to get a cut of it. And we kind of came from it from a different position where we really wanted to provide value to our students. And so we really walked them through everything from how do we identify the property, how do we structure the deal, how do we negotiate with sellers, what does that art form look like in addition to those technical levers that we want to pull, and then how do we really pull it together with the right asset type. Throughout the 16 weeks, we also weave in personal stories, our personal experience as well. And where most people, I think, are talking about real estate as if it's theory, we're really talking about things that we're actively out there doing in the trenches and also with them. So,
Yeah, I think this really started because people were asking a lot of times, "Oh, do you do any course? Do you have any class? Do you do any some kind of? Do you do mentorship?" I just I was so against it for so long because I feel like this is a space where so many people are doing this and they're just completely full of shit and they haven't done any of this, right? And I'm like thinking, I'm not going to name people. I mean, everyone can think of one, but um, I didn't think it was right where someone has done 2 or 3 deals and now they're selling a course, right? It just seemed ridiculous, and I didn't want to be lumped in with that. But I think enough people asked, and I decided we're going to do this in a way where I'm not going to talk about all the money we've made on XYZ deal. I'm going to talk about all the things that went wrong on all these other ones because that happened. It happens a lot. It even happens now, right? You have
yeah.
to. There's things that go wrong doing these. There's things that not according to plan, and I wanted to be the people that showcase the failure in this business, but also showing yes, there's failure in this, but this is why we're going to do it this way instead. And that's what we're really trying to do with the Walls and Wallets classes. Take off of our experience and off of the experience of the guest speakers we have come in to uh, show, pull the curtain back really on this and show things that a lot of these other courses can't do because they haven't done it before, really.
Right.
And that was how this all started.
And really what we're doing is we're giving people an opportunity to join our tribe, right? And not everyone has the appetite to go out there and perhaps build their own, but while we're doing this, we're also building a sense of community. We're also spreading our culture and our philosophy. We want to be able to do the right things. As far as our brokerage and Walls and Wallets goes, we really only have 2 rules. Don't break the law and don't screw anyone over. And if you could agree to those 2 things, I mean, you're in. And I think the camaraderie that we have in our group, I think is really incredible.
Yeah, we're really like kind of the misfits of this real estate
Yeah.
world. And
We're kind of the anti-brokerage or,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this,
that's kind of how we view ourselves.
because there's a lot of us, and now we have a place we can all be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. I really do. I think it's fantastic and agree so much with this sentiment that I think there should be some sort of rule that if you don't have some scars to show from being in the arena, you don't deserve to lead anybody, right?
Yeah.
The stands are full of those that say, here's how you should do it. And yet for those of us who have been in the arena, it's a whole different world. And so to form that kind of group, that these are people doing this, they're helping each other, that kind of blood camaraderie is truly something that's really, really, really awesome. So you guys should be very, very proud of that. The gist of knowing you and anybody I think that knows both of you uh, is that it could be summed up, at least in my view, by a piece of script written by Jack Kerouac in the 60s. And he talks about a group of people that he describes as the mad ones. And he writes, I'm going to read it to you so you can see if it fits. Kerouac says the only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing. We've had endless discussions, and as your friend, as your coach, we get right to it. I've never heard a paragraph in our discussions that was commonplace. We talk about how it really is. It's transparent, it's candid, it's not couched. It's just the right amount of wrong. It's cutting edge. It's what do we do to get over this or go in this direction or make a big difference here, or it's wonderful scheming on moving life and the ball forward. And to me, that's what a mad one does. He lights up the room when he goes there with his mad thinking, with his mad way. And in the Northwest, and soon to be known in the world, wherever you land, you guys are the mad ones. And it's a privilege to have you sitting here with me on this podcast. I know that your contact information will be put out there for everybody to be able to connect with you guys. And again, you've been in the kitchen of power players. What a contribution to this community of power players you are and have been and continue to be. So thank you guys for being with me on this podcast. Here's to the mad ones.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, you guys.